I own nothing. The Leah jolted awake when she heard the door creak open, showing that the killer was back. Straining her neck to try and see where he was, but he stayed out of her limited line of sight, but she could still hear his footsteps. "All right, asshole, you've had your fun, now let me out, so I can kick your ass," shouted the Leah, putting on a brave front and glaring at what she hoped was the killer's direction, though truthfully the Leah was terrified. She didn't have her weapons, she couldn't use her abilities, and she was currently held captive by a deranged killer. She didn't even know how long she'd been locked up, without any clock or windows to see outside, only the cold metal walls of the room. It terrified the Leah even more than when she was trapped in her tree. At least then she knew she was at Camp Half-Blood with her friends close by, but now she didn't know where she was, and well and truly alone. The Leah screamed a little and jumped, or would if she wasn't restrained, when the killer slammed his hands down on either side of her head, his masked visage hovering over her. After a moment of staring at her, he patted her cheek and moved away. The Leah then heard something rolling along the floor before stopping beside the table she was on. The Leah's eyes widened, and she paled when she saw a cart filled with different type blade tools, syringes, and bottled with clear liquids inside. Before she could even think of what he'll do with those, the killer tossed something on the cart, and the Leah was surprised when she saw it was his mask. This could be her chance to see who the killer was, and if she could escape she'd be able to get back to her friends and tell them. The Leah watched as the killer came into her view, and she finally saw what he looked like. Spiky sunny blonde hair, pale skin, 3 jagged whisker marks on each cheek, and grey-blue eyes with slit pupils. If the situation was different and they met before the Leah joined the hunt, she'd admit he was handsome in an animalistic way with the whiskers and slut pupils. "Ah, feels good to get that thing off, gets hard to breathe after a while," the killer commented before sorting through his tools. For a moment nothing was said, the Leah staring at the killer, thinking if she's ever seen him before, and said killer, deciding which tool to pick. Though the silence ended when the Leah spoke. "You're a demigod, aren't you?" stated the Leah, now seeing familiar features, namely the blonde hair and grey eyes. That obvious never really understood why Athena's children were all blonde when the bitch herself has black hair. While one could argue they inherit the blonde from the father, what if the father isn't blonde? I just find it strange. "But yes, I am a demigod, sadly," said the killer, grabbing a syringe and a small bottle. The contents he put into the syringe. What is that?" the Leah questioned, more than a little terrified. "Did you know that baby rattlesnakes are more dangerous than adults? It's because they haven't learned to control how much venom they secrete," said the killer, avoiding the question, with the Leah now uneasy of what he's likely going to inject into her. "I remember when I learned that. It was actually a dual learning session. It was 5 months after my 4th birthday. I had met a woman, never really knew her, only seeing her a few times around the village, but those few times I knew she was like me, hated and alone, something to do with her former master being a traitor. When I met her, I vaguely remember feeling something akin to happiness, to have finally met someone like me, but you see there was a difference between us. While she hated for being associated with her former master, I was hated simply for existing. Another was that she had people who cared for her, while I had no one. But you know how humans can be, they are selfish, petty creatures that only care about their own interests. So, tell me, the Leah, what would you do to get people to stop hating you?" asked the killer, the Leah remaining silent, unsure if what the guy was saying was true. "No answer." "Well, I'll tell you, you simply attack someone that everyone hates more than you. That's she did to me. She approached me under the guise of being my friend, I still being a naive child starved for affection accepted. In return she knocked me unconscious, tied me up, and threw me into a snake pit filled with hundreds of venomous serpents, all while she and dozens of villagers laughed at my pain as the snakes bit me, injecting their venom into my blood. It took me 6 hours to untie myself, and another 7 to climb out. I broke my fingernails off climbing out and 5 of my ribs from falling back in. The killer said while the Leah wasn't sure if this true, it still horrified her that anyone could do that to a child. You know what that experience taught me, for one is that snakes are useful creatures, especially the venomous kind. The second was that the only person I could trust was myself. I eventually got my revenge on the woman, but only after killing everyone she cared for, taking away her goal of revenge against her master, and showing her that no matter how she acted, who her friends were, if people trusted her, she'd always be nothing but a snake whore. Said the killer, preparing to stick the syringe in the Leah's arm. No, 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 please don't. The Leah said, don't worry, this won't kill you, I made sure of it, but you'll wish you were once it works its way through your system. If it's any consolation, once this over, you'll start seeing things my way. Said the killer, injecting the venom into the Leah's arm. The screams that followed made Naruto smile evilly. Asterisk with Annabeth asterisk, you sure this is it? The Leah said as she and Annabeth drove up to what looked like an abandoned hospital. Yes, this is it, Konoha Hospital. Replied Annabeth after getting that message from the killer. Annabeth had looked up the Konoha Hospital where the mask was made. Though there wasn't much information on it, just that it was an old hospital closed a few years ago. Ironically enough, it was located in Alaska. After getting a location, Annabeth had gone to the Leah, telling her about the message, wanting to come with her, not wanting to risk running into the killer alone. The Leah agreed, wanting to get her own payback on the killer for when he jumped her. So, Annabeth and the Leah had snuck away to go to the hospital, and now here they were. Getting out of the car, the Leah grabbed a crowbar from the back seat, making Annabeth stare in shock. What's that for? Asked Annabeth. Well, a bow or spear wouldn't really work in narrow hallways, and last time I met that masked freak, he apparently can shrug off being stabbed, so I'm going a little old school. The Leah said. You wouldn't happen to have anything else, would you? Said Annabeth, as the Leah smirked. Got you covered here. Said the Leah, handing her a stun gun. Do you wanna know why you have a stun gun? Annabeth said. Probably not. So, ready? Questioned the Leah, Annabeth nodding slowly. As I'll ever be. Annabeth replied. With that, both girls entered the abandoned hospital, unaware that someone was watching them. This place is huge. Said Annabeth, surprised. Maybe we should split up. The Leah offered, Annabeth shoving her a little in response. Hey, that's not even remotely funny. Said Annabeth, just a suggestion. Defended the Leah. A bad one. Annabeth said, just messing with you. Said the Leah. They continued their search, walking down a hallway before looking down, seeing a trail of dried blood on the floor. Oh gods! Muttered Annabeth. It keeps going. The Leah said, seeing the trail go past a door following the trail, Annabeth flinching when she heard a rattling noise. When they stood in front of the door, they saw the killer's mask symbol painted on the door. He's been here. Said Annabeth. What do you wanna do? The Leah questioned, Annabeth breathing in deeply. I wanna find that son of a bitch. Annabeth replied. Me too. Said the Leah. They pushed past the door, seeing a blood-stained tarp. Moving the tarp aside, they saw more tarp hung up, blocking the room. Pushing past the tarps, they stopped, seeing something covered by a blood-stained sheet, flies buzzing around it. Moving around it, they traded looks before nodding, and the Leah tore the sheet. Under the sheet they saw a headless snake and a cut-open owl corpse. Oh, gods, that's disgusting. The Leah said, covering her mouth, before Annabeth noticed something. The heart's gone. Said Annabeth, seeing the heart missing, while the Leah looked at her strangely. So's the head. Stated the Leah, motioning to the where head should be. Help me find the lights. Thalia said, looking away from the corpses. Annabeth found a light switch behind her. Flipping caused the screens lining the walls to hum to life, showing off several X-rays. "What the hell are these?" said Thalia. "They look like X-rays for a patient." Annabeth replied, looking at a few. "I can see that. I mean, why are they here? Wouldn't they have been taken when the hospital closed or something?" Thalia clarified, as Annabeth examined the X-rays, finding the name of whose they were scratched out while taking a few pictures to look at later. "Yeah, you're right. In fact, look at the difference between pictures and everything. They look almost new. If they had been left here since the hospital closed, they'd have showed some sign of wear," said Annabeth before going silently. "So, what, someone wanted us to find these?" "Why? Annabeth, said Thalia when she didn't get a response. Thalia saw Annabeth looking mutely at X-rays, her eyes wide in horror. "Annabeth, what is it? What's wrong?" Thalia asked. Annabeth taking a shuddering breath. "Thalia, look, X-rays again. Look at the size of the bones," Annabeth said shakily, confusing Thalia. Thalia saw that the bones and skeleton were small, really small, as if it was a child. Thalia soon realized, looked horrified. These X-rays were of a child, one that's been abused or even nearly killed. Thalia joined Annabeth in looking at the screen in horror, looking at the different injuries. "You don't think this kid was a demigod, do you?" said Thalia quietly. The thought made Annabeth pale. Sure, she knew not all demigods came from happy homes, some even running away like her and Thalia, but Annabeth has never heard of any demigods being physically abused like this. It looked like some tried murdering the poor child multiple times. "Wait, there's something else," said Annabeth, seeing another picture at the end. Going over to it, they saw it was a pregnant woman's sonogram. "Look at the name, Kushina Uzumaki. Think that's the kid's mom," said Thalia. Annabeth thinking she's heard that name before maybe, but wait, why scratch out the name of whoever these belong to, but leave the mother's name? Annabeth wondered. Thalia shrugging, who knows what goes through lunatics' minds. Said Thalia, "Come on, there has to be more." Annabeth said. As they moved to the back of the room, they found several jars filled with different colored liquids, along a dozen filing cabinets, along with evidence that someone had been staying there. Thalia opened a binder, flipping through it while Annabeth walked over to one of the cabinets, pulling out a medical folder, noticing once again all the names were scratched out. Opening it, Annabeth began reading the report, though she'd soon wished she hadn't. Patient. Age, 1 year and 7 months. Sex, male. Blood type, B. Injuries, dislocated shoulders, cracked skull, left leg broken in 3 different locations, puncture wounds to left kidney and spinal cord. Annabeth covered her mouth in horror. This was horrible. Who could even think to do this to a child? Quickly grabbing another file, Annabeth saw it was for the same child, only now it was from when he was 2.5 years old. The injuries were even worse. File after file Annabeth read, and each was worse than the last. All these files for a single person. Thought Annabeth, covering her mouth. "I think I'm gonna be sick." Annabeth thought, struggling to not empty her stomach. Annabeth, check this out. The mask the killer wears, they were custom made for this kid after each of his surgeries. Thalia said, "There's more than one," said Annabeth. "Guess that explains why the killer was so willing to give her one. Wait, the killer was the one who gave me one of those masks made specifically for this child after his surgeries. Then that would mean this boy, he's the killer." Annabeth realized, if it's true and the killer was the boy, all these injuries, these attempted murders, were inflicted on. Part of Annabeth could understand why he's the way he is now. Not that it excused the people he's killed. "That's not all, look at these," said Annabeth, handing Thalia one of the files. When Thalia read the few Annabeth had, the latter not being able to stomach reading even a full drawer of them. She resisted the urge to empty her stomach, while also figuring out the same thing Annabeth had. "So, this kid is our killer," said Thalia, feeling faint-headed, while Annabeth nodded. "But that's what I find strange, all of this, the hospital, the X-rays, these files. It just feels staged," said Annabeth. "Well, it was likely this was a trap, but so far we haven't seen our masked friend. Let's just look a little longer before getting the hell out of here," Thalia said before spotting several metal shelves over there. Walking over, the girls saw different objects with a few on a metal cart. "This is Piper's necklace and Frank's bracelet," said Thalia, seeing Piper's camp necklace and Frank's bracelet given to him by Hazel. "This is my necklace," Annabeth said, grabbing her camp necklace that had gone missing a few weeks ago. "Bastard kept souvenirs," growled Thalia before seeing something above them aiming her flashlight up at Annabeth. Thalia said, getting her attention. Looking where Thalia was, Annabeth saw dozens of photos hanging by strings from the ceiling. "The missing pictures," stated Annabeth, "and you're the star," Thalia added, seeing several pictures of Annabeth. Suddenly they heard the intercom system come on as a haunting melody began playing. "Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer, do, I'm half crazy, all for the love of you." "He's here," Annabeth said, scared. "Come on, let's get out of here," said Thalia as they both ran out of the room and out of the hospital. Later Annabeth stood in front of a new board showing all the pictures she took at the hospital while in her hands was a book. Beginner's Guide to Being a Kick-Ass Kunoichi by Kushina Uzumaki. It had appeared in Cabin 6am few years before she went on the Lightning Thief quest. As first most of them thought it was a prank from the Still brothers, but Annabeth, being the curious child she was, couldn't resist and read it. Surprisingly, the information was incredibly accurate on how a real kunoichi, stealth, eavesdropping, assassination, how to craft ninja tools, and fighting techniques. When she first read it, Annabeth had guessed it was written by a daughter of Athena who was obsessed with ninja, but with this new information she wasn't sure. Annabeth now believed, maybe, Kushina Uzumaki was an alias her mother used for when she had a demigod child. But that wouldn't explain the sonogram, as her mother was a virgin goddess and didn't have children the traditional way. Right. All of this only left Annabeth with more questions than answers. All she knew for a fact was that the killer was abused and nearly killed on several occasions as a child, and something truly bad must have happened to cause him to finally snap and become a killer. He was a demigod who was unaware of his heritage, but found out and holds a lot of hatred to not just his godly parent but demigods as a whole, and now all these killings were part of some greater revenge plan. Annabeth would say he was like Luke, only with the crazy dialed up to 11. And finally Annabeth was certain he was a child of Athena, given it's Athena's demigods that seem to be targeted the most, with Annabeth being the killer's main target, as it's not secret she was Athena's favorite child. Just then her phone rang. Annabeth answered, already knowing who it was. "What do you want?" said Annabeth. "I was just calling to check in on my partner. Tell me, did you like my surprise I left you and your little friend?" "Yeah, it was really helpful, I learned a lot, bro," Annabeth retorted. Figured it out, have you? I knew you would. You're a lot like the whore that way, and it's that reason I'm going to enjoy breaking you like a twig. You wanna know something? At first I was terrified of you, and I'm sure I still am, but now I think you're pathetic," said Annabeth. "What did you just say?" "You heard me, you are pathetic. All these pointless killings, it's all one big temper tantrum. What, just because mom didn't love you enough you feel like taking it out on people who've never even done anything to you? I read your files, I know what you went through as a kid, but that doesn't give you the right to kill innocent people, in fact it makes you no better than the people who hurt you. Annabeth shouted at the end, her anger making her temporarily forget who she was talking to, though after a moment she calmed down and realized what she had just done, and Annabeth went deathly pale. She not only just shouted at the killer but compared him to the same people who beat him to near death as a child. Even she knew that's crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. For a moment the killer was silent, worrying Annabeth further, before finally he spoke, more like growled. "You little fucking bitch. You not only raise your voice to me, you have the fucking gall to compare to those worthless pieces of human trash." That was a mistake, Annabeth, because nobody, and I mean fucking nobody, compares me to them and gets away unscathed. So, congratulations Annabeth, you damned not only yourself but everyone you care about. I'm going to take pleasure in slaughtering every one of your families and delivering you their heads. And Annabeth, do not think for 1 second just because you read some papers you understand a fraction of my pain, but trust me, you will, oh you will. With that the killer hung up and Annabeth felt her legs give out beneath her, tears falling from her eyes. What have I done? Thought Annabeth with Naruto Naruto was angry, no scratch that he was blindingly furious. How dare she compare him to the villagers, the very same people who made it their life goals to make him as miserable as possible. That he would never have a normal child, to always be reminded that no one would ever want him, that he was just a worthless demon. The last person who dared to do that, he ended their entire bloodline, brought them back to life and killed them again. But sadly he can't do that. He's waited too long to throw his entire plan away because he couldn't control his temper. Besides, this just means he has to accelerate his schedule. Banging on his chest, not created 3 clones. You go to Camp Jupiter and erase the 5th cohort. You go to the Amazons and turn them into a bad memory before mounting their heads on spikes, and you go to Manhattan and cut the sea god's lover and her husband into so many pieces that her own son won't recognize, then scatter the remains in the Hudson River. Now, ordered Naruto, the clones nodding and vanishing in the shadows, pulling his mask down over his face. Naruto vanished to his own location. If the demigods thought he was bad before, he's going to make sure they'll never sleep peacefully ever again after this. Chase residences. Naruto didn't bother sneaking in, simply smashing down the front door. He'd already put up a barrier, silencing seals, and an illusion to make everyone ignore him. The minute the door fell down and he with the frightened screams, walking, he saw Annabeth's stepmother, father, and half-brothers. First, he appeared in front of the stepmother, stabbing his knife up and through her mouth, making the boys scream in horror. Before they could try running, he reappeared behind them, grabbing one by the head and twisting it 180 degrees, before the punching clean through the other boy's chest, gripping his heart, which he tore out. Finally he grabbed Annabeth's father by his throat, slamming him against WHY. The man choked, Naruto dragging his knife across his cheek, leaving a shallow cut before lifting his mask. For certain victims he lets them see his face, wanting them to know exactly what their killer looked like. Your daughter did something she shouldn't have. This is me showing her what happens when I'm angered. Your family, they were the lucky ones because I killed them quickly, but you, I'm gonna take my time tearing you apart. Growled Naruto. For the next 5 hours the only thing heard in the house was Frederick Chase's screams of agony and Naruto's deranged laughter. Time skip. Please, 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 please gods, mom, anyone, please let me make it in time. Annabeth mentally begged, running through the streets of San Francisco, not caring who she bumped into. After the killer's threat against her and her friends' loved ones, she immediately ran to the hangar, taking the fastest plane there was and flown to San Francisco as fast as she could, hoping to reach her family before the killer could. Since she's the one who angered him, it's likely he'd go after her family first before the others, and Annabeth only hoped she reached them before the killer, and maybe even stop the killer entirely on her own, said the Athena part of her, which she promptly ignored, only caring to make sure her family was safe. Though when Annabeth arrived, she was greeted to a sight she's only seen in her nightmares. The front door was broken down. Slowly walking in, Annabeth covered her mouth to stifle the choked sobs and to stop herself from throwing up. There was her family dead, Matthew and Bobby hung by their own entrails, her stepmother nailed to the wall, her head having been removed and shoved into her chest. But the worst was her father. All the skin below his neck had been flayed off, exposing the angry red muscles. Each of his ribs snapped off and stabbed into his arms and legs, his organs ripped out and organized around him in a macabre display, and finally his eyes and tongue cut out and put in his empty chest cavity. Not only that, but a message written in blood was above his corpse. "I warned you." The sight made Annabeth fall to her knees, leaning against the wall, sobbing. "No, no, no, no. Please, this can't be happening. Please don't let this be happening." Annabeth begged. She didn't even need to know that the same thing has already happened to her friends' families, and it was all her fault. Why couldn't she have just kept her mouth shut? This wouldn't have happened. Please just let this end, thought Annabeth,